So I'm going to do a very quick review on the motion program because you'll probably be needing this over the weekend, and I just kind of want to go over the different things that we learned in class. Obviously, we're going to make sure it's at the 1080p and set your frame rate to 24 frames per second and change your duration to 20:00 in order for it to be 20 seconds long before you hit the open button. Now, just so you guys can see the project settings under Inspector Properties, set to 24. You got 20 seconds. If you needed more time, you could actually change the duration here, and that would change the timeline. Notice the background color is set to black, but it is in fact transparent. So don't let the black fool you. The black is really transparent. Okay, you always start off with a group, right? And that's where we're going to be putting something. Let's start off by just adding a circle, just so you can see some of the basic motions. Now I'm going to hold the Shift key down to make a perfect circle, and notice if I do that, the circle actually ends up in the group right here. You can actually change the colors of these things. I'm going to select my transform tool just so I can select it. You can always change the size afterwards. Select my color or my circle, go to my shape tab here, and you can change the color of the circle. You can give it an outline if you wanted to, like yellow, whatever you wanted to do if you're generating a shape here. Now, some of the things that you can do to the circle. Notice currently if I move my animation play range, nothing's happening. So we can add a basic motion, and we've used throw before. Now throw goes X, Y, and Z. We do not need the Z, so I'm going to select my throw, go to my behaviors tab, and open up my velocity. We know that positive numbers are to the right and up, and negative numbers are to the left and down. So if I wanted this to go to the right, I would make the X value go right, and you can see that that circle just throws to the right. That's pretty straightforward, and it'll take the entire time to get to the end of that path before it loops back. There you go. Now you can add a different behavior on top of that, and we went over this in class as well. Under parameters, there's something called a wiggle, and wiggle allows you to wiggle one of the parameters, and you'll notice here that the wiggle parameter has not been applied to anything. You see it says none. So we're going to select the property that we would like to wiggle, and the position we would like up, down, and left, right, and so that'll be your X and your Y, right? And if we do that, now we instantly still see the throw, but now it wiggles. So think of this, if you wanted to, as like a firefly moving through the frame, or if it were going up, it would be a bubble under the ocean, right? We can add another behavior to the circle. So they just compile one on top of the other. And so that behavior could be Oscillate, which is another really important behavior. So I select Oscillate. What Oscillate does is it's like a pendulum. It goes back and forth and back and forth. We still have to apply it to something, so I'm going to select two properties, transform, and this time I'm going to do up and down. So what is that? That is the Y value, up and down. And you'll notice that if I do that, I get this sine wave so that the thing goes up and down. Now all of these areas have properties. So the wiggle property, you can also turn them off, by the way. So I'm going to turn off wiggle just so you can see the oscillate along with the throw. And if I turn off the throw, you just get this up and down motion. So this would be like an oil platform pumping oil or something like that. If you add the throw in, it just becomes like this beautiful sine wave. And you can add the amount of amplitude. So notice that it's at 100 pixels here, but by clicking on the number, we know that we can go much higher, right? So this is a boat on the ocean or something like that. And we can change the speed. Okay, so this is something going back and forth across something. So each of these, wiggle, oscillate, and throw, all have their all can be dialed into different settings. So I'm going to lower the amplitude back down to something, and I'm going to turn on the wiggle. And so now we've got wiggle turned on. We've got throw, and you can kind of see that's the motion for the ball. So I'm going to select my circle again, hit stop, go back to the beginning, and move that ball down. To duplicate something, like say I have this circle, I can Command D, and that duplicates the circle. Now I have two circles that do exactly the same thing. If I don't want them to do the exact same thing, I can move them into different positions. I can also change the timing on these values. See, oscillate here, I can change the phase. Now it is out of phase. I can change the wiggle settings to be a little bit less than 100 and change the frequency to make it slightly different. And then finally I can change the throw velocity. Because it's farther away, it's going to go slower. So now we have two things. They're both working in differently, but I didn't have to do any more work because both of them had the same oscillation going on here. Okay, so that's my group here. I'm going to make a new group by just clicking in the area here and call it new group. And I'm going to call this group flower. And what I'm going to do is make a flower that spins. So in this flower group, I'm going to go ahead and pick up my circle again, and I'm going to just make a petal. There's my petal, and you can see it right here. Circle, petal, P-E-D. I'm just going to call it ped. Now, here, we notice that if I were to like put this petal into a flower, I would like the center of the petal to not be in the middle of the petal, but actually to be down here. So we've changed the anchor points before by clicking on anchor point, and I'll just zoom in here so you guys can see. We just move the little green arrow down. That means that if I were to put these petals together, let's say I put the anchor point right here. By the way, when I made this petal, you notice that right here, the flower petal started like wherever my playhead was. So I'm going to move my playhead back. We've done this before and extend it to the full 20 seconds. So now the petal exists the entire place. So anyway, I've got my anchor point selected and I'm moving it here. And what that does, I'm going to go back to my selection tool, transform here. And if I were to take this petal and rotate it, you'll see, select the petal, go to properties, and then I'm just going to rotate it, let's say 60 degrees, 60, and hit return. You'll notice it rotates around the anchor point, right? And so in this way, we're going to be able to create several new petals. So I'm going to duplicate this petal, Command D, and then I'm going to rotate that petal here, right? Command D, rotate the petal. 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 And Command D, rotate the petal. And so now I've made, if I zoom out a little bit, I've made this flower. And I still have the balls going. And you can see all the petals are located within the area of the flower. Now I could have changed the colors of the petals, whatever. Now I'm going to collapse the flower group so that it doesn't take up so much space. And you'll notice that the flower group also has an anchor point, and that just happens to be way over here, which makes no sense. So again, I'm going to select the flower group because everything has its own thing, and I'm going to move that anchor point to the middle. By the way, Command Spacebar allows me to zoom in with the mouse to be, more accurate. So I'm going to try to move that anchor point to right in the center. It doesn't want to, but let's force it here. Just we have to turn the snapping off. Okay, and then I'm going to just zoom out here. The reason I want the flower anchor group here is I would like to add a spin to this flower, right? So I'm going to take the flower group. Notice not individual petals, because if I did the petals would move. But I'm going to take the flower group and I'm going to add a behavior, basic motion, spin. Now the spin has a rate, right? And currently it's set to 0. So if I were to just move my playhead, you can see there's nothing happening. But if I add the spin rate to a positive, you'll see it starts to spin in that direction. If I put negative, like negative 50, it spins in the other direction. So now I have a spinning flower. It spins the entire length of the video, and it's not on any one of the petals, it's on the group. In fact, you can see if I take this spin and I just add it to this petal, it'll just spin that petal. So you could use this to create like a windmill instead of a flower, right? You can add this to a structure and it can be spinning as well. I'm going to take the entire flower group and I'm going to change the scale of the flower group. And you can see now I have this spinning flower that I can move as long as I select the group. I can move that group anywhere. By the way, notice how I did not go back to my transform tool and I have my anchor point selected. Please always remember to go back to transform so you can actually move these things. So I've got one flower group. If I wanted to add some of that cool wiggling and oscillating and throw to this flower group, I can actually do what I've already done, which is select these three and hold the Option key down and drag them onto the group. And if I do that, it adds that same motion behavior to the flower group in addition to the spin. So it's spinning and it has all those other elements. Maybe I don't like the oscillation part, but I do like the spinning. So that's how you would do that. So I've talked about groups and adding groups together. Another thing that you might want are waves or something to that effect. So let me show you how that looks. I'm going to go back to fit here. So let's say, for instance, we're going to make a new group, and we're just going to call this ocean. And what I'm going to do for the ocean is make a rectangle, and this represents the ocean. And because the playhead was moving when I created the rectangle group, it actually made it the entire way. If I had stopped the playhead and made the rectangle group, it would have started right here, just so you know. Okay, so let's add a little bit of ocean movement to this rectangle. You probably know what we're going to add, but just in case, we're going to select the rectangle, or we could select the group itself. So say, for instance, on the ocean, I might want to put like some type of boat or something. So like maybe I'll have my circle here, and then this becomes a little boat or something to that effect. I'll even make it kind of that color. And maybe I'll change the rectangle to be a little bit more of a deeper blue. So now we have, and I'll put the circle under the rectangle, but still within the same group here. And so now we've got the circle, which is our boat, right? And then we've got our rectangle. We can select the ocean group, and then what we can do is add the behavior parameter, and we're going to oscillate this. And we're going to actually have two oscillations, so I'm going to duplicate the oscillation just by Command D. The first is Properties, Transform Position, and I'd like the waves to go up and down, like in a nice motion, so you can kind of see, or back and forth, and that's our X. And you can see that I need to make my group a little bit bigger so it doesn't go off screen. And I might want to select the amplitude and bring it down a little bit, so it's just barely going back and forth, right? And then the other oscillate, I would like to go up and down, so I do Y. And now we have this feeling that we're like on an ocean, but you notice that it's just a back and forth oscillation path. So what we need to do is change the phase a little bit, right, and change the speed, and what you're going to get is a little bit more, you can kind of see the animation here, you're going to get a little different looking things. So this is based on how fast things are going relative to one another. So I'm moving the amplitude back, I'm moving the speed back, and I'm moving the speed back on the other one. So until I get something that looks kind of interesting. So at this point, you've got this feeling that this is just water or something like that. Okay. Always remember the black is transparent. So if you do want something to be a background, right-click New Group to make it a background group. And I'm going to call this Background, BG. And I'm going to move it underneath everything. And notice I'm not going to move it into the group because that puts it in a group. I want to move it under everything like this. Just collapse these groups up here and just be really careful until I see a line, and that line I'm going to make sure it is under this group. And it just, nope, didn't do it. Let's try it again. There. And so that moved that background group underneath this group. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an object, and it's going to be a generator, and we're going to add a color solid. And what that does is it creates just a solid color. You can kind of see it's like a blue rectangle. And we're going to change the color of that to be maybe sky, a little bit lighter or maybe warmer like this. Because it's underneath everything, you can kind of see that it's in the background and it's taking up the space. Now, let's see, what else do we that we've talked about before? I think this is hopefully helpful. We did talk about adding in keyframes, and I'm just going to go over those one last time. I'm collapsing all the things here just so you can see them here, and I'm going to turn on my Keyframe Editor here. We've talked about this or done this for the strawberry piece, but I'm going to review how a keyframe works. I'm going to stop my animation and I'm going to go back to the beginning of my motion project. I'm going to add a new circle here, and we're going to be keyframing that circle. So I'm going to make a perfect circle and make it nice and pink, right? Just so you can see that we've got some animation here. Now currently we don't have anything happening on the circle. Now the way animation works, as you can recall, is we go to any of these keyframe elements here, anything that we want to animate. So for instance, if we wanted to, let's just start with position. Say we want to start the animation, we want to start with this here, and we want to then go here and then go back up here. We can do that by saying at the beginning of our animation, at this point, our position for X and Y are set. And so at this point, this is going to be set. Nothing's going to happen, and you notice the keyframes exist at this point in time. If I move off of that place, the keyframes go away because there are no keyframes. So I'm going to move about halfway through the animation, and I'm then going to use my move tool here and just move the circle to the middle of the animation where I would like it to be. And that means at this point in time, this ball is at this exact spot, and you can see the actual animation lines here happening, and you notice that they're curved. That means that they are slow to start and they speed up and then they slow down at this point. Then I move my playhead where I'd like it to end, and I take my ball and I move it to where I'd like it to end, and maybe I'd like it to end there. And you'll notice if I do this, we've got, because we have those curves on, we have this slow start up, and then it speeds up, and then it'll slow down here because there's an ease. It slows down, right? And then it'll speed up again somewhere around here. Now the nice part about doing it with keyframes is that anywhere that there is not a keyframe, you can physically drag the ball, and you've just added a new keyframe, and you can kind of see it right there. So now it'll go on that. So if I wanted this to go a little higher here, I could do that. And then over here, I'd like it to be like right behind the ball. You see, I can do all these things, add the keyframes in anywhere I want. Like here, maybe I would like it to go back up here so that it kind of, and so we see this motion path that we've created based on these dots down here. Now currently it's nice and smooth, but if you wanted to make the interpolation instead of like slowing down every time it got to a keyframe, more constant or linear, you would just select linear for both of these. So we go to interpolation linear, and now you'll notice that there is a nice, very smooth single motion that's happening in the ball. It's not slowing down or speeding up at all. Of course, these corners are like very harsh, so the physical motion of that line, if I click back on the circle to see that, this motion right here, here, and here, it's a very harsh motion, but the linear motion is what we're looking for. One thing to note, if you find that you've put too many keyframes in, you can always select the keyframes. You can either move them around. You can kind of see I'm moving this keyframe around, or I can delete it with the delete button. So if you've made too many keyframes and you want to just start over, you can delete these keyframes and they will delete. Also, remember, you have to be at a keyframe, and the way you actually snap to a keyframe is just by using these arrow keys, and that'll snap you to the keyframe, and you'll see the yellow here, and that way you know that this is the actual keyframe that you're modifying here. Finally, let's just talk about, okay, the circle right here. Let's say we select our circle, we've got some animation. We can also animate any of these other properties, such as opacity. And notice that the opacity is just like in Photoshop. You can make things more or less transparent just by dragging the opacity down. And you could animate this. So we could start with the opacity here at 64, make it get a little less transparent by just moving somewhere else in time and bringing up that slider, and notice it makes a new keyframe. And then later on we can have it fade out totally or just completely like that. So now what we have is something becoming more or less opaque with those keyframes. So very similar to what we've already done, but without motion, but instead opacity. You could do the same with rotation, those kinds of things. Another little thing that you have is a drop shadow. So if you turn that on, let's just show you what that looks like. And then show the drop shadow things. You can actually create a drop shadow that actually creates a shadow, as you can kind of see. You can change how blurry it is, so it gives it a little bit of 2 to 3 dimensionality if you have flat things and you want to add that drop shadow in. Notice how the drop shadow also is like obeying the opacity choices you've made. Finally, I want to just be very clear. Like, here's our flower. I'm going to close up our animation tab because we don't need it anymore. But I am going to open up the flower tab here, and you can see we've got wiggle, throw, spin, oscillation, all those things. I'm going to turn off everything except the spin, and we see our flower here. I'm going to actually add a drop shadow so that it's easier for you to see the flower. I'm going to increase the blur and the distance and the opacity of that drop shadows just so we can see that flower a little bit better. And you can see it's spinning. If I wanted to limit the spin to start at a certain point and end at a certain point, I could do that just by selecting my spin and hitting the I key, and that's my in point, just like in Premiere. And that means before it hits this area, nothing's happening, and it starts spinning right now. And then if I wanted to stop spinning anytime, I could just move my playhead to where I would like it to stop spinning, select the spin, and hit the O point, O for out. Now I have it spin just for this range, and then stop. Now if I want to do that over and over and have it start stop, I can obviously just take the spin and duplicate the spin and then move it anywhere I want. And so now it'll start again and stop again. So with every behavior that you add, you have the ability to have it on the whole time or start it and end it at different times, and even copy and paste little segments of this behavior so that it makes sense to what you're doing. Okay, I hope this helped. The last thing you're going to be doing is exporting from Motion. You're going to use your export movie. And remember, you have to select the background. Make sure nothing specifically like this is selected. You have to click on a blank area and then hit Share, Export Movie. Sorry, hit the wrong one. Share, Export Movie Default. Change your settings to H.264. This is really important because we don't know what the source was. So H.264, canvas setting, color. We only need color because we're not exporting the transparency. Take a screenshot of this if you have to, because this is what you need. Here's the info. Here's the settings. H.264, only color, and then your entire project, 20 seconds, right? And then finally, render. The highest quality is selected, right? So that's good. Everything else usually is good. Now, we haven't talked about cameras, but if you had multiple cameras, here's where you would select them. And make sure you save them on this next field. Make sure you save them someplace that you can find it, like on the desktop. And this is our test animation, Annie. And I'm going to hit save. And then after a moment, you'll see this stop spinning here. You can kind of see it right here. It takes a while. But here's my 20-second animation. It should pop open. And here's what we've got. Notice it's a lot cleaner than the preview in Motion. That's because we had, we had it like at a higher, we have it exported at a higher quality. Hopefully this helps a little bit to use Motion, and you can use some of the tricks here if you need them.